connection. It's inside our scheduled thing, and I think we're live. Let me double check here. Megan, do you have a link?
I have the link that yes, we
I
are
see us
live.
live. All right, we're live. Woo! Boy, that was last second. We were struggling to get this to actually work. I hear an echo somewhere, so somebody
Yes,
may
we
have
are
to
live.
make sure. Yeah, I hear echoes, guys. Somebody, you got to turn off the YouTube feed on your end.
We were struggling to get this
You
to
guys have YouTube playing on your end, fellas, and so therefore it's feeding
I'm
back to
not.
the mic.
I'm not on.
Yeah, I hear
Okay,
it.
maybe it's me then. Let me double
You
check.
got to turn off the YouTube.
Yeah, my YouTube is off.
You guys have YouTube playing.
Yeah, I hear it coming back through another microphone right now.
I'm not on.
Yeah, I hear it. Okay, maybe it's me.
Do you guys hear it?
Yeah, my YouTube is off.
Hey, everybody who's watching us on YouTube right now, thanks for bearing with us. We are wringing out the final bits of tech challenge here because we're using a new software called Riverside that connects to YouTube and then connects to all of you from there. And apparently there's a tab open somewhere that is
Chris, do you have
playing
echo
back-
cancellation on yours?
I think
I mean, I don't have any YouTube open. Echo cancellation, it says it's on.
cancellation on?
I definitely hear it coming back from
I mean, I don't have any
you guys.
I don't have YouTube open. Not me.
You might check that it's not open on a secondary tab somewhere like that.
I don't have YouTube open. I
Okay.
don't.
Let me see here. Oh, that went away now. Now it's gone.
Not open on a secondary.
Nope, I hear it again now.
I don't have YouTube open.
Ah. All right. Well, let me see if I have any control over microphones. So checking 1 2, checking 1 2. I'm just seeing if I can determine where the echo is coming from, and then we'll jump right in here. So I muted Megan and Chris, aka Dog. I muted your mics, and now it's gone. Megan, I just unmuted your mic, and I have the problem coming from you, Meg. So I'm going to mute you, and then Chris. I think I got your mic. Say hi.
Hello.
Yep, we're good. So Chris, you're good to go. Megan, maybe you can figure out why you're sending YouTube back to us, and then I'll unmute you again. So, and then let me just see if we're there. I think we are still showing up on YouTube, so that's good. So hey, everybody, good to see you. I'm Lid Shaw, Recording Studio Rockstars. I am joined today by Megan Gohill here in the center of my screen. I'm not sure how it's viewing on yours. I think on the right of your screen is Megan, and he's muted for the moment because we're figuring out how to. Oh, you might be good now, Meg. Are you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're
it
good,
turns
yeah.
out I had a hidden window open.
Oh, those hidden windows!
My
I
fault.
knew it. And then we also have Chris King, one of my longest and oldest buddies, joining us. I think he's on the center of your screen on YouTube. He's going AKA Dog today. So he often goes by Bro Dog. And so welcome, fellas. Welcome everybody on YouTube. We are here today because we are very excited about a new record that we've released this fall that's coming up. Actually, the actual album, full album release is just right around the corner, Megan. Is that right? What's the date for the full album drop?
November 8th, this Friday, November 8th.
Okay, awesome.
And it'll be out on all platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and many others.
Right on. And right now we've been releasing a steady stream of singles on Apple Music. So we've been following, Megan is our record label, and Chris Dog is our, he's my songwriting partner and co-creator in this particular album. He's about to show us something too. Chris,
And
go.
November 8th is timed for the anniversary of the death of Orhan Veli. He died November 14th, 1950, and for some reason relative to the release mechanisms that Go Hill Records uses, November 14th was not an opportune date, so November 8th was chosen.
Right on, right on. Hey, I'm going to pull up, see if I can get the live stream pulled up so that I can see. I might hear an echo for a sec. See if I can get the chat visible in case we There it is. I was hoping you'd be there, Chaz. So Chaz Root from Electric Owl Works is already joining us on the live stream. He gives us a shout out. Greetings from South Wales, New York, USA. Good to see you, dude. Chaz is somebody who's been a participant in recording Studio Rockstars for a long time. Good friend. He's also on the show. And got an amazing studio in New York. Sorry, Chris. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was done.
Cool.
So, how do we want to begin, fellas? Chris, would you like to, or Megan, would you like to take over and sort of do an introduction to this?
Sure. So, let's just go ahead and get into the questions. So one thing I've been curious about, Chris, is what inspired you to set Orhan Veli's poems to rock music? Was there a particular poem that sparked the idea? What was the thought process?
Well, Lidge and I have been writing songs together since the late 80s, early 90s. The rock band Enormous Richard, which became the rock band Eleanor Roosevelt, kind of plateaued at a point, and we had accumulated recording equipment. So we decided to stay on the road rather than performing. We stayed on the road recording others. Became a field recording venture. And one of our first, if not our very first outing in Brooklyn, New York, at the apartment of Lidge's brother, Nate Shaw, we recorded a group of poets that were assembled by Hanging Loose Press, which published I, Orhan Veli, translated by Murat Nemet Najat. And Murat was one of the poets that we recorded. And I just fell in love with his translations of Orhan Veli. Orhan Veli was basically the Bob Dylan of Turkish poetry. He was also the punk rock of Turkish poetry. I mean, Ottoman poetry was this ornate, highly formalized poetic tradition. Orhan Veli wrote poems with lines like, "I'm crazy about puff cheese pastries." I mean, it was just crazy. He broke every form, every rule. He remapped, he created modern Turkish poetry. And these poems just begged to be sung, and we started singing them.
How did you approach adapting these poems? Did the meaning of the poems influence the musical style or arrangement?
No. I have here a shoebox of cassettes. This record existed in mini cassettes for many years. Most of these songs Lidge and I wrote on a different road trip. I became a travel editor. I settled down for being a traveling musician to become a travel editor, which is hilarious. So as the travel editor, I got to pick the stories I assigned myself. And I assigned myself a New Orleans Cajun country story. I'm an opportunist and I'm not stupid. So Lidge joined me, and we spent a week driving around the bayou setting Orhan Veli to music. And to me, it's no different than if the lyrics are mine or if the lyrics are Orhan Veli translated by Murat. It's the same problem. You hear a guitar part, I hear a guitar part, and I start looking for the right line to sing with what feels like the beginning of the song, and it just goes from there.
Yeah, that was a really cool trip, man. That was that point where you, Chris, were working for the travel magazine, and so you'd have these trips, and you said, "Hey, dude, you want to go down to New Orleans for a weekend?" So I flew down from Nashville, and we spent 3 days. It was New Orleans and Lafayette and Baton Rouge, the Triangle.
And McElhenney Island, right before, if you can recall, there was a far distant day where there was one Tabasco sauce. One.
Yeah.
And we toured McElhenney Island and Tabasco when they were about to put the chipotle, the jalapeno, the garlic, all of these, and we had test batches, and we walked away with test batches. I felt like, it was like being given a piece of the moon or something. My mother still has the test batch of the chipotle when no one had tasted it but them and us.
I remember we were we got to meet the food scientist, and then we got to meet the local chemist, and the chemist took us into their lab. And of course, we got very excited when she showed us the mass spectrometer, because that was a lyric from one of our songs back in our college band. But we didn't, of course, know what it was until we saw it there for the first time. but she also pulled out this glass vial, and it was a heart-shaped glass vial with a little stopper on the top, and it just had black goo in the bottom, like black oil. And she said, "Do you know what that is?" And I'm like, "No, it looks like, you know, something from the bowels of hell." And she said, "It's pure capsaicin, which is the hot stuff that goes in hot sauce or in any pepper that makes it hot." And it was, I could be wrong about the number. It was like 50,000 Scovilles or something. Whatever it was the highest, the most hot that anything could possibly be. And she said, "It's so hot that if I took the stopper off this bottle, all of your eyes, you'd have to go into the emergency eye room and nobody would be able to see. Just your eyes would be watering and tearing just in the room."
By the way, this is becoming a live stream about Tabasco, but McElhaney Island is not an island, it's a salt hump in the bayou, in the swamp. And every Tabasco you've ever had was made with that salt. And we also left that meeting with a piece of that salt, which I no longer have my piece of. Do you have your piece of that
You
salt?
know, I tried to keep things like that for years, and I'd put them on the mantelpiece, but I think eventually somebody cleaning the house thought that that was something to be cleaned off the mantelpiece.
You can afford to pay people to clean your house? Jesus Christ, man.
Well, I mean, you know, I wouldn't have taken it off there. That's all I'm saying.
So
Could
yeah,
have been anybody.
to further date that trip, we visited Angel's Whiskey River Landing, which is no longer open. It was the greatest juke joint in the history of time. It was a juke joint on a pontoon boat on the bayou, where all of the greatest Cajun and Creole bands in the world played their local Sunday afternoon gigs.
Yeah, that was really a lot of fun. But the other thing I remember about it, so, you know, because obviously this live stream is about the that's interesting. I wonder if I made it bigger. This live stream is about the record I, Orhan Veli. It's about writing songs to poems. It's about the whole process of composing poems and essentially borrowed lyric into song. It's you know, it's about a writing exercise in that respect too. But for us, that was one of my first introductions to it with you. I know we'd written other stuff before, but this was the first time we got together, and we spent all weekend, and we cranked out 17 songs, which, funny enough, we thought was a gold mine of tunes back then. Now, of course, we get together and we crank out, you know, 10 new ones in a single night or something like that. But it really like opened up this world of like really fast sketching of songs and coming up with new ideas.
Which I, Orhan Veli, should be thought of volume 1, because we have many more than 17, actually. I've got a whole shoebox here of cassettes of these sketches, and I think they're all really worth doing. And also the process of putting other people's words to music is worth doing. If we have other songwriters that listen to this, for me, it came out of the process of being a front man and lyricist in a traveling band, where you would sing the same 15 songs every night in a different town. And I was pretty proud of my lyrics, and I was told by various people they liked, and a couple people covered our songs with lyrics I wrote. But I got to the bottom of them pretty quick, and I got really quite bored with my own lyrics. But I found if I put someone else's words to music, I'm crazy about puff cheese pastries. I'll never get tired of singing that line. You know, I could sing it every night.
It's a great line.
And he has great, you know, really, truly great lines. I turn into birds and leaves, a song that's not on this record. But wow, singing other people's words is very exciting.
Yeah. Well, do you want to keep riffing on some of the lyrics that have gone into this record, and any standout ones? Or,
Chris,
Meg, what questions do you want to ask next? Meg?
So, how do Orhan Veli's themes like freedom, everyday life, and social issues, how do those resonate in a rock music context?
It's just he's just extremely punk rock. You know, we're basically a post-punk rock band, and in the sense that we play very classic rock and roll, but it's rock and roll after punk. And with punk comes the freedom to do it yourself, do it your own way, not necessarily always be musically proficient, although this is, I think, a quite musically proficient record. So it's self-centered, but not in a selfish way. It's John Lomax, the great field recordist, he said the rasp is the universal sound of self-assertion, like that raspy voice. And I remember an interview with John Fogerty where he said, he spent a winter in Oregon trying to sing with a rasp because he didn't sound like anybody until that raspy voice of John Fogerty was something that he created to sound raspy. And punk rock is that universal sound of self-assertion. And Orhan Veli is all about self-assertion.
Well,
He's
to
all
me,
about who he is today.
to me, that brings up another aspect of the songwriting thing too, which is that I feel like at a certain point in my life, it occurred to me that great musicians that I admired, they had a persona, a character, or something. They seemed like they were a bigger than life character in the music. And it's easy to look at that stuff sometimes and think about your own music and think, oh, I'm not that big of a character, so I guess I'm not that good. And until you begin to realize that it's the practice of adopting that and about taking on a character. It's just like being on a play. Somebody hands you a script and then you get up there and you have to be bigger than life to perform the script on stage. But that's still tricky to do with your own stuff. So I feel like adopting other people's lyrics gives us an easy chance to start figuring out, like, oh, well, what could the character for this be, and then you sort of act it out, but inevitably you discover who your own character is through that too.
It's true. And Orhan Veli also, he writes about very everyday things like his taste in food. He also writes about things that are so obvious that maybe no one ever thought to say it before, but it's very revelatory to hear it. The Minutemen lyrics can be kind of like that. There's a great Minutemen song titled "Shit from an Old Notebook," where it's like that's what everybody writes their songs. It's always shit from an old notebook, but they're the first people that ever titled it. Like an Orhan Veli song, lyric that we do sing on this record is, "I know living isn't easy, but dying isn't easy either, guys."
Yeah.
When you put it that way, it's like if you're complaining about your day, think about the alternative. I mean, if getting through this day is difficult, how much more difficult would it be to not get through this day? And he also writes about things that are very sad. There's a song called on this record, They Don't Know. They don't know, those who don't live alone, the terror of soundlessness.
Yeah.
I mean, Lidge does live alone. I don't, but it puts it in this way. He's just very real.
Yeah.
And if you want reality, then you want Orhan Veli.
So great lyrics. So in Ease, what are the lyrics in the bridge? Those are some of the lyrics that just leapt out at me, and I was like, when it hit me, I'm like, what a simple, great lyric for the bridge.
Well, it's interesting because that's one where I had to go to a different poem because we needed a bridge. Well, we felt the need for a bridge, and I was out of the poem. So I'd actually have to hear the song again to remember.
There's a foot in my foot.
Yeah. I think of a foot in my foot. I think of a mouth in my, again, it's
a stomach in my stomach.
A stomach in my stomach. It's so, and another line of that is, I don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an Orhan Veli line translated by Murat. And by the way, Murat Nemet Najat is equally important in this. This is a little known but true story. I myself have co-translated every single poem Orhan Veli ever wrote from Turkish into English with Defne Halman, and we'll come back to Defne Halman. But we sing Murat's translations because even though Defne convinced us that we could beat Murat's translations for literalness, we could not beat them for rock lyrics. They are the greatest rock lyrics, better than the poems that I myself co-wrote from these poems.
That's great. We're getting some nice comments in from Electrical Owlworks too.
And who is it doesn't know the feeling, I don't know what the hell to do? I mean, so he has everything from this feeling of like boundless optimism and belief in the day and the possibilities of the day and the possibilities of the self to the most terrible hopelessness, living alone and talking to yourself. I run into mirrors
Yeah,
he says.
that's one of the lines I just love.
Because he's going towards another person and it's only himself. Also, he was a rock star in his day. He really was the Bob Dylan of Turkish poetry. He was a rock star of Turkish poetry in the way there is no rock star of American poetry. Allen Ginsberg, Walt Whitman, Charles Bukowski, whoever you name, they are infinitely, exponentially less known in the U.S. than Orhan Veli is in Turkey. And I, Orhan Veli, which is the title poem of our record, the title track, it's about being a celebrity. He's like, I, Orhan Veli, heard you were curious about my life. And it's basically a self-interview. He says, I have a girlfriend. I won't name her. Let the critics find her. I mean, it's this like little thumb of the nose.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically dealing with literary celebrity, and he writes a poem about it. And we wrote a song about it, which is, I think, hilarious.
This comment came in from Electric Owl Works, just talking about the backstory being a good thing to hear in this process. I run to mirrors. It's what's funny to me too is you described the running to mirrors as I'm so by myself. I'm going to the mirror just because I'm trying to connect with another person, and in the way that it's in the interpretation of the listener. I think I remember hearing that lyric and thinking, there's like a self-interest in it. It's like almost like I love myself so much I run to mirrors, and I was like, what a fascinating line. So maybe what are your thoughts about that? I mean, that was something that Leo kind of taught us, or taught me, was the idea that once the poem is created, this is Leo Canellan, who we did another record with, Crossing America, and Leo said, and also from Hanging Loose Press. And Leo said, once he creates it and puts it out there, it's not his anymore. So he didn't have any comments on how we decided to interpret it in music. He was just glad that we were making it our own and sort of remixing it through our own art.
Well, let me amplify that and issue a slight correction. So Leo Canellan was the poet laureate of Connecticut, although he was from Maine. He's sadly deceased as well. His publisher was not Hanging Loose, but Curbstone Press.
Oh, that's what I mean, right? Curbstone, right.
Actually, a more important publisher to us, because we stayed at Curbstone Press on all of these East Coast trips, and we recorded in their basement. Unfortunately, Curbstone Press is now defunct. All of this happened some time ago, and there's, to me, a lot of nostalgia and a lot of sadness that all the people we've lost. But we, again, having been a rock band we were sort of almost famous. We're on some well-known compilations. We open for some famous bands. We have a little footnote in music history, I would say. But we plateaued. We weren't really going anywhere. So we became this other thing, and we made a couple records. And then we made a record of poetry to music, Leo Canellan Crossing America, and the BBC did a feature on it. And I was sort of our publicist at the time, and I just jumped on this, and I says, well, let's do more of this, because we're doing rock music of our music. No one cares anymore, not much. We do one record of poetry, and we're on the BBC. So I purposely put my effort more into poetry to music, because I felt like we could have an audience doing it. And Curbstone Press was our great benefactor. But that Leo's, what happened in that was great. We were exactly like we did this Hanging Loose session in Brooklyn. We did this Curbstone Press session at an NPR affiliate in Connecticut. And they had a bunch of poets, several poets there. We took a break to get pizza, and Lidge always left the mic on, because you get the best stuff when no one knows what's happening. And Leo's like, you're a young man, so I'm going to do my young man poem. I hitchhiked through 48 of the 50 states. And, and he reads this thing called Alice in 11 Dresses, which is basically a bum date raping a bag lady.
Yeah.
Yet it's incredibly beautiful. And how that could be beautiful is one of the miracles of poetry. And we still need to release Crossing America digitally.
That's right. It's queued up.
But that put us on this road to Orhan Veli. And I mean, this book is out there. You can get it. There was a website where all these poems were for a long time. I mean, the water's fine. Come on in. Put Orhan Veli and Morat to music and send us your tunes. We don't own this material.
Hey, Meg, do you have some more questions from some of the questions that came in too?
I do. Yeah. So one of the comments I got on the when I posted up some of the links to this, there was a person from Turkey who said um, he felt that Timur Selçuk's interpretation better captures the essence of Orhan Veli's work compared to rock music. Um, how would you respond to that? What unique qualities do you think the rock music brings to Orhan Veli's that might differ from a more classical, dramatic Turkish approach?
Look, can I start that one, Chris?
Yeah.
So my thought on that is the whole importance of doing any of this stuff is to bring what's interesting to you. If you find a poem interesting and you find this style of music interesting, put them together. Like, who's to say that they're supposed to go together or not go together? I take no, I have no problem with that comment coming from somebody. It doesn't bother me a bit, and it doesn't make me doubt that the music that we chose to put to this poem is just as valuable as anything else. Yet at the same time, I don't withhold somebody's ability to be a critic about it either. I mean, it's like it's all just your personal experience. If you want to make rock music out of poems, do it. If you want to hate rock music made from poems, say it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we are sort of cursed by we are so many different things. Like we call ourselves Three Fried Men when I'm the lead singer. We call ourselves Birds of Chaos when there's many lead singers. We're on Go Hill Records. We also consider ourselves poetry scores. That's the overall umbrella. And the mission of Poetry Scores, which was once an arts organization, but is now kind of a disincorporated phantom of the heart, otherwise known as a hobby. But we build community by translating poetry into other media. Translating. A translation is you take something and you put it somewhere else. Our last session, we were putting to rock music poems I wrote based upon ethnic minorities from China. And when I invited people to do this with us, I kind of said, please don't try to sound Chinese. I mean, I can't stop you because it's your song, but we're not trying to sound Turkish. We're not trying to sound Chinese. We're trying to translate that into what we do, and what we do is post-punk rock. And if somebody from the host culture doesn't like it or doesn't like it as much as their thing, that's not going to insult me or bother me or make me less inclined to do it. I mean, we all get to not listen to what we don't like. So it's kind of like what Lidge said.
What do you
Awesome.
hope listeners will take away from this unique music and literary fusion?
I hope that they want to, as a producer and engineer, I hope they want to turn their stereo up in the car, because we made a rock record, and I love doing that myself. And Chris suffered through an entire long weekend of mixing with me, where you patiently sit for days in the back of a room staring at the back of my head while I just tweak things. And we took it up to the car many times to go just turn it up as loud as possible to see if it still feels right. So that's a tech part of the answer to that question.
Well, what I actually did was went around the corner to Southern Grist Brewing and brought back beers and drank delicious Nashville beer. And I didn't look at the back of his head. The back of his head was there, but I wasn't looking at it. I remember like the song Ease that Lidge mentioned, which, if I may be so bold, I would describe as boogie woogie.
Mm-hmm.
It's post-punk boogie woogie. And all I know is
It's not punky wonky.
it should be said that this band is a hybrid. We are half, geezers, 50 somethings, and we were half much younger people, 30 somethings, 20 somethings. I mean,
who also call themselves geezers over in the UK.
Probably, but they were half the band was half the age of the other half of the band. Yet when we heard the playback of Ease, we were all out on the patio of the Toy Box dancing, and we were imagining doing this. Gallata Bridge, hanging out on the Gallata Bridge is one of the poems that we put to music that's on this record, and we were imagining like performing this with people line dancing on the Gallata Bridge. So I want you to imagine yourself on the Gallata Bridge, where I've never been to Istanbul, Lidge's father lived in Turkey for a time, but I don't believe you've been to Turkey either, have you?
I've not. No, I did go to Turkey when I was little. When I was 6, we did a family trip there.
Ah, but
So
I want you to picture yourself on a bridge in Istanbul where you've never been, line dancing. That's what I want you to feel. That's what I felt.
yeah. Well, so let me give a little bit more context to that too. Here is let me see here. I'm just trying to cue it up. Well, almost there, almost there, almost there. There is what little bit of a peek into what one of our sessions looks like once we get beyond the sketching stage. So I mean, we didn't talk much about that, Chris, but you know, we've learned the power of a song sketch. So when we get together to write stuff, we might write really quickly and move at a pretty lightning pace. Like we'll be in record on a voice memo the moment we have something that seems like it's got a good feel to it and it's got a vibe and it's got an outline of a song idea. We'll just put it away and go to the next one, knowing that we can come back together in the studio and do this as a band and finish it out and find, you know, what the arrangement is and all that kind of stuff. And so like here's a shot of us on a recent one in my studio. You guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Testing out the screen share here. And so like that's, you know, look at cameras up on the stairs, but just, you know, at the end of a session, having gotten, how many songwriters do we have in this one? In this one, we got Dave right there, Brian Carter, Sean, me, Chris. And then of course we all songwrite together because we decided that the best way to do this stuff was to begin a process and then understand that it's nothing if it isn't the whole group. I mean, it's nothing but like, you know, if you don't get the whole group together and record, then all you've got is an idea of like, oh, isn't that a cool song we started to write? And wouldn't that be great if we recorded it one day and did something? So with that attitude, we just adopted a strategy that says when we get together in the studio to do this stuff, it's just a split, like we're forming the band U2 or something, and everybody's just an equal partner in the music. So we credit everybody as a songwriter, copyright holder, and a master copyright holder, right down to the interns. And you know, obviously, it's not going to always be like a you know, some people will do lion's share of work and maybe less for others, but what are you going to do? You know, again, it's still, you don't get there unless you get everybody together. So that's what it looks like in the studio. Then we have fun making pictures because we've done a bunch of sessions around Halloween. What's the skunk there,
Hold on
Chris?
from that last riff. So during the formative years when we were evolving from being a band to being something else, a field recording collective, I was traveling pretty much constantly, and I spent a lot of time at an intentional community, which you might call a hippie commune, in Ozark County, Missouri, on the Arkansas border, East Wind community, and an elder in that community was also now deceased. He had this great line to me. He said, "What is unshared is wasted." And that really just, it's grooved into me, you know, so deep into my brain. What is unshared is wasted. And one of the reasons I write songs, I'm probably better at writing prose, and I made a living as a journalist, but I'd much rather write songs with Lidge than write prose by myself because it's unshared. And I don't really want to be alone, you know? So,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
was
I've
that?
learned, I love music. I love picking up guitars. I love the ability to play all the parts and control everything and dial it in, you know, musically just so in my studio. But I don't love the fact that when I do that, it's just me by myself. And it's not the same experience as playing music with your friends and making music with other people. That's the thing that when I started got me to want to do this stuff. It's just something about making music with people. It's a communication, you know?
Also, before we get too far from our road trip, which one of our listeners enjoyed, uh, the fact that we were doing our sketches on cassettes, not on voice memos, the smartphone did not exist at the time. it posed a problem, which Lidge will realize at some point as I talk the story I'm going to tell, because you could record over a cassette in a way that you can't record over a voice memo. Of course, you can screw up and delete a voice memo, but we had a whole side of a cassette, which I don't know how many songs we'd written.
17. I think we'd already written and recorded 17. This was on probably day 3. That's why we made this mistake that's coming up in the story.
And now we're in Shreveport, and we're in a bar, and Kim John Guidry starts telling us stories about, we learned about things like the Backdoor Jody, which is the backdoor man of blues lore fame. And we learned about like how all these guys are out on oil rigs and the landlubbers are having sex with their wives. And he's just telling us all this Shreveport lore. And we got to get this on tape. So I get my cassette and we record it. And I recorded over half of our songs. So we reconstructed all but one. There's still one song we never reconstructed. It's called Carnation, I believe. But yeah.
Oh, fascinating. And you would know that because you've got the source poem to remember that there was something done with that poem. Otherwise, for me, it just, in the memory and out the memory.
I wonder of the 10 songs on this record, I wonder how many of those were reconstructions of something that Kim John Guidry's voice was. I remember there was a video game or a poker game or something on that was part of our despair as we listened to it. You could hear this idiotic poker game and Kim John Guidry.
We were so proud of ourselves for writing all these songs all weekend, and then we just erased over all of it on the cassette. Back in the day when you had the little Sony cassette recorder and travel with it, All right, let me see. All right, might have a couple more photos. Let's see if this will work. So this is I was going to ask you, Chris, can you explain the skunk here? Why is there a picture of a skunk?
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense really, but at one time, Enormous Richard, one of the founders of the band, Marshall Boswell, who, if you're familiar with David Foster Wallace, Marshall is the dean of David Foster Wallace criticism. He wrote the first book about David Foster Wallace. Back when no one took him seriously as an iconic, canonical writer, Marshall did. Actually, he left St. Louis because our graduate program in English would not let him write his dissertation on David Foster Wallace because he wasn't a serious author. Huh. Well, it goes to show. But he thought we were ska and country. Well, we weren't ska. We had one ska song, but ska plus country equals skuntry. I thought it was more like skunky country. Really, we were a country punk band, but we kind of stunk. We weren't very good, and technically speaking. For the record, Lidge joined my band. I started Enormous Richard. He joined my band. He was one of the 2 best guitar players on campus. I knew I couldn't get him to play guitar with me, but I heard from the grapevine that his mother had given him a fiddle and a banjo. So I said, Lidge, we called him Elijah in those days, Elijah, we don't even practice. So you can learn these instruments on stage, shaking your butt, drinking free beer, and getting laid. And on those terms, he joined. And wow, for that reason, I got to make music with this guy my whole life. But we were pretty skunky. So it's skunk country, or the skunk became our icon, our totem.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. And then, of course, a lot of the skunk artwork, not this particular one. This is probably just messing around with some graphic on a phone or something. But a lot of our artwork comes from another member of the band, Matt Fuller, who moved out to Los Angeles back in the 90s to study story, to become an illustrator. And he became an incredibly talented storyboard artist. And he throws away sketches that any of us would probably be proud, and practice a lifetime to be able to make that well. It's just part of that routine.
And volume 2 of Orhan Veli will include a bunch of songs I wrote with Matt that we recorded at Hollywood Recording Studios with Megan Gohill. Birds and Leaves, Backgammon in Chinatown. Those are some good songs.
Yeah, here's a little shot of us, the control room. Here's a shot during a dinner break up in the house of you guys working on one of the next songs on a session. Now, these are from different sessions. We've been doing this for many years, so I didn't find the photos from this actual session. And this particular session started back in I mean, Chris, our songwriting was 98 or something like that. So this is,
Thereabouts.
yeah, and then finishing the record was 20 years later, hitting the studio. So for those of you who are ever thinking it's taking a long time to finish a record, don't worry, we've got you beat, and we've been finishing records that took us 16 years, 20 years, 30 years to make for a long time.
And good ideas stay good. They just do. And there isn't any reason to abandon your good ideas. And also, there isn't any reason to stop writing songs and recording them if you feel like you're losing your audience, because we lost our audience when we were a traveling band. At least it plateaued. We still had an audience, but we could see it was not growing. But we wanted to make music together, and we kept doing it for ourselves, and our primary audience is still ourselves. And I think there's a reason to make music even in the absence of an audience. And also, you never know when you may discover an audience. I still believe if this music becomes known in Istanbul, it's going to have an audience in Istanbul, an audience that we can't imagine today.
Well, I think any band and group of musicians or just an individual songwriter, their primary audiences are always themselves to begin with. So I think people would understand that for sure. These are all this skunk right here, and then this text. These are from Matt, and he creates digital art for our country group and for poetry scores. But it's like so great. As you can see here, he'll hand carve this out in linoleum first, then print it, then scan it in, and then create digital art from it. So very old school. But Megan, of course, who we haven't really given a proper introduction to. Oh, here's a sign of us. Sometimes we do very remarkable things in the studio on a session, as you can see in this photo right here. This is right outside the studio here at the Toy Box. And then there's a little more outside the studio. There's a lot of, when we're doing the recording sessions, there's Matt Fuller in the red t-shirt over there on the right. There's a lot of staying up very late and also reminding ourselves how much we enjoy drinking beer together and making
Note
music.
Dave's shirt. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, beer.
That's right.
It's about 7 parts making music and 3 parts drinking beer, listening to the mixes, and telling us how great we are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-congratulation going
Yeah.
on.
So if you're not practicing that with your own music and band, you should be. It's very, very uplifting to self-congratulate. Very good for the soul. It's good for finishing your records and continuing to make records together 35 years later, which is how long I've been making records with Chris here. Now let me finish the proper introduction of Megan here in the center, who's asked a few key questions, but hasn't gotten a lot of mic time. Megan is also one of our oldest buddies, going back 35 years to our time at Washington University together in St. Louis, when we had our first band, Enormous Richard, which is, we don't have to go too deep into it, but that's the kind of name you come up with for your band when you're in college, sort of like naming your band Free Beer. And Megan has done many things, but he has slowly and sort of like slowly, and well, I don't want to say quietly because it's not really quiet because records are getting put out, but just built up this whole record label. And so Megan is our record label for the music that we create. And Megan, I'd love for you to tell us more about the label, but give us an introduction to Go Hill Records.
Yeah, so we've got a few artists on the bill on the record label. Three Fried Men, also working with other artists: Hunter Cross, Chris Chamness, Miranda Burry, a few others, and Sean McGovern, of course. And we've been putting out records now for, gosh, I don't know how long. Originally, it was under the name Hollywood Recording Studio, but as you pointed out, Hollywood Recording Studio sounds like a recording studio, and the record label grew out of the recording studio itself. So I decided to switch the name over to Go Hill Records.
Yeah. Well, it also sounds like there's like, for some reason I conjure up this image of like, let's take that hill, so there's a little of that in there too.
And we all met at Washington University in St. Louis. We all made our first recordings at Tejan Studios at WashU. And we were just lucky to have met Dave Melson, our bass player, and one of our songwriters was in that group, Matt Fuller. We're just lucky to have met the right people when we were young, and then we just held on to each other. I often say that no one with less talent has ever been given more free studio time, because these two guys, two of my best friends my entire life, both open recording studios in industry centers, Los Angeles and Nashville. I mean, I just don't have a studio in New York. Is the only thing I'm missing out on here. But I want to talk a little bit about Daphne Hallman and her father, Talat S. Hallman. I co-translated Orhan Veli with Daphne. She was the Martha Quinn of Istanbul. If you remember Martha Quinn, the first VJ on MTV, she, like when Turkish national television introduced a video music channel, she was the first VJ. She was a star of stage and screen in Istanbul. Her father was a diplomat. He was the first minister. Talat S. Hallman, her father, was the first minister of culture for the Republic of Turkey. He was a diplomat for the United Nations. That's how I met Daphne when I was living in New York. I went to a reading of her and her father, and I became her friend. It was just, I have a gift at making friends. That's probably my superpower. And she was the first nanny of my daughter, and my daughter's named Layla because Daphne gave us a book of Turkish poetry names, and all of our names all our candidate names came from that book. Layla, by the way, is Turkish, is Arabic for night. And her father, who gave me an autographed copy of his translations of Orhan Veli, he was one of the few people at Orhan Veli's funeral in 1950. And here's how he begins the introduction to his book, which tells us a lot. Orhan Veli Kanik collapsed on November 14th, 1950 in the city of Istanbul. He was rushed to the hospital, fell into a coma, and died before midnight. He was 36, but already a legend in his lifetime. He was the enfant terrible of Turkish poetry, the man who had written the notorious line, "I just wish I were a fish in a bottle of booze," which Matt Fuller and I put to music. Attending physicians must have felt that his wish had been granted, for they first assumed that death was the result of poisoning due to intoxication. Later, word got around the poet had fallen into a ditch in Ankara, the capital, a few days before, and had been complaining about an unbearable headache ever since. As a result, a number of people concluded he had suffered a brain concussion. A few intimates also recalled that the poet had never fully recovered from a serious automobile accident in 1939. Then he had been in a coma for 20 days. Officially, it was a cerebral hemorrhage which ended the life of Turkey's most talked about, most colorful poet. But alcohol could lay claim to being the unofficial cause, for the fall into the ditch in Ankara had followed a bout of heavy drinking.
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of alcohol theme, and in fact, that's one of the singles that we just released. Maybe
Something about alcohol in the air.
Yeah, let's go through. How many singles do we have out now, Megan?
We should have 5 out by now.
5 out. So maybe that's too much to cover in one in this final stretch of the live stream here. But maybe we can go through each one and we can talk a little bit about each of the songs that are.
Yeah, let's start with
so far.
something about alcohol.
Okay, great. Which Chris was attempting to do before I didn't let him continue. So.
Oh, and there actually is
Rock
3
on.
that are out right now. 3
There's
songs.
something like alcohol, I think it is.
Yeah, something like alcohol.
Something
yeah.
like.
There's something like alcohol in the air that makes me want to drink. I mean, it's just the ultimate drinking song.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about that.
It was a fun one. That was one where we played. I played a slide guitar on it. That was it was when we wrote this. We were using a slide guitar. Just you and me and an acoustic and a slide. And I didn't know what to do with the slide, so we just broke it out and tried to come up with some new idea with it. And then turning that into the full band was a lot of fun. And of course, we had John Richardson, who was interning here at the studio. Remember when I said we'll include everybody who was there on the session? So he was helping to do a little bit of the recording, and then, it's like, oh, you play keyboards? So he jumps in on keyboards. Like, oh, you really play keyboards, So he played all these incredible keyboards, and then it's like, oh, you play trombone too? Great. So the next thing you know, we have an armada of trombones on the song, and so that blended with all the guitars just really does sound like it sounds like war trumpets with the song. There's something like alcohol, with the line. So it's a very intense tune.
John's a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps band, which is
That's
very
right.
cool. And these are very, very, very small poems. I mean, here's the poem in Murat's my guy, Murat. By the way, Murat makes a living selling Turkish rugs. He's not a professional writer. There is something like alcohol in this air. It's making a guy like me feel bad, bad. Especially if I'm also homesick. Your lover one place, you someplace else. It's making a person like me feel sad, sad. There's something like alcohol in this air. It's making a guy like me drink, drink. So it's actually a drowning your sorrows lyric. But for us, it comes out like, I mean, it sounds like Guns N' Roses or something. It's this ferocious rock song.
Right. We could have gone with the like tear in your beer old style country approach, which would have been maybe too literal an interpretation. Who knows?
What are our
Can you
other
talk-
singles?
What's
Can you
next,
talk about
Meg?
the color of tea?
Oh, what a good one too.
So this is our torch song. It's probably the first time in my life I really tried to sing like I know how to sing. I think I kind of pulled it off. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful line, and it's a really good one to think about because it's a vision of Orhan Veli that's very different from this other person that we're talking about. You know, it's just about like the small things in life and what's beautiful about them. And a lot of times my titles are not the titles of the poem, so it's not popping right up in mine. But it's just like how beautiful the color of tea in the morning. How beautiful this small boy, you know, just this child that he finds just a beautiful child. You know, it's like you're sitting at a cafe and you've got a cup of tea and you see this beautiful child walk by, probably with a parent, you know, and it's imagism is the kind of poem that it is. The famous poem of imagism is Ezra Pound's the image of these faces in a crowd, petals on a wet black bough. It's an image from the New York subway, but it's just a beautiful, like one image. That's only one image for that song. Just beautiful.
It's like a hook in a song, you know, musical hook. And,
How
and
beautiful
just a
the
really
color.
powerful image.
And I think we've all. I mean, I'm more of a coffee drinker, but when I I don't drink coffee. I drink coffee and cream. When I mix coffee and cream and I see this beautiful color, it's like, you know, just this beautiful color. It's just, I don't know, the beautiful color of tea.
I vowed long ago to never write poetry about the cream swirling in my coffee. It just seemed like the oldest songwriter poetry trope that's ever been. But it is a nice thing. It is a nice thing. Like I live in Nashville. It's like people move here and they're like, I'm gonna go to the coffee shop and write my song lyrics there.
Can you talk about?
Other singles.
Wait, there's something I
to-
wanted to comment on the color of tea though that also hit me. That there's something you brought, Chris, which is, you know, in this instance, I'm coming up with a musical progression or line or a fingerpicked part, and then you pull out a book of poems and you start looking for a way to sing over it. And there's a great deal of power, like creativity power in the mismatch, the misinterpretation of things. So for example, in my head, this chord is the first chord of the phrase, but then when I play it, you would come in on the second chord of the phrase, and you've done that before. And we end up with this really, to me, like really evocative melodic interpretation of the chords that's so much better than if I had just tried to, you know, do it myself where everything fits together tidily, you know, in a box. And it's one of those things that I really encourage everybody to try, you know, the co-writing process in that respect. You know, don't always think about the stuff that doesn't turn out as expected as a problem you got to solve, but like, no, this may be where the greatest idea comes from, you know.
It's like the literary critic Harold Bloom's idea is literature comes out of creative misreading
Yeah.
of previous literature. It's getting it wrong that makes fresh work.
Megan, you had another one queued up.
Yes. Let's talk about I am listening to Istanbul.
Well, that's perfect because you're really in his head. And he was a poet of Istanbul. He lived in Ankara for many years. He worked for the National Film Archive, Orhan Veli. But he was a poet of Istanbul. I think we have an audience in Istanbul if we can find them. And it's just a love song to it.
Chris, on that one, that's got like a, each song has a very different feel to it. And a lot of times I might start coming up with some guitar idea and then you just hear it. And something in your process inspires you to grab a certain poem and try it over it. Do you have any thoughts about like what that is? How would you pick how do you, I mean, can you even answer it? How you would pick a particular poem or mood over what you're hearing as the guitar sketch in that moment?
I can say it's literally one of my favorite things in the world to do is to hear a good guitar part by you, or Matt or Dave, but
Yeah.
by you, and find the right first line. It all, and that's why I write my own poems too. Is I always have a notebook of poems, and once you find that first line, everything else follows. If you listen to yourself and you listen to the music, so yeah, I just love that process of finding that first line. And this is a great poem because even though it's about a particular place, it has lines like here's a line. I am listening to Istanbul with my eyes closed, the drunkenness of old times in the wooden seaside villa with its deserted boathouse. I mean, not only does that speak to me, I mean, anyone that's ever been by the sea anywhere or any lonely place, but also reminds me of one of my favorite rock songs, which is Backstreets, um, by Bruce Springsteen, sleeping in that old abandoned beach house, getting wasted in the heat. So I mean, Bruce Springsteen and Orhan Veli come together in the wooden seaside villa with its deserted boathouse, sleeping in the old abandoned beach house, getting wasted in the heat. I mean, it's got Bruce Springsteen when he's sleeping in the surfboard factory and writing songs on the beach with little Steven. And it's in this poem.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Well,
Matthew White is a rock and roll poet.
it makes me think that it probably helps in our process. It helps that you also know the poems pretty well. Like you don't jump into this totally cold. I think you jump in having read through them and absorbed the poems on some level, or do you find that you can just jump right in cold on these two?
I usually bring to the session poetry that matters to me. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've read it and thought about it, and it's already singing to me. I just don't know what it said.
Cool. We're coming up on time, so I have one final question here. Uh, can you talk about some of the upcoming literary or musical projects that we've got coming up?
Well, we've got a ton of stuff queued up on our list. Megan, you and I sat down on the phone and we listed, so almost without trying too hard, we came up with 10 next records to release, which brings up a couple of thoughts. One is, Chris, you sort of humbly mentioned that we're our own first audience. We, you know, any artist, anybody who's making music starts out with nobody else knows about it and is listening. But so by default, of course, we begin there too. But then there's a process of trying to share your music and get it out there, which we did. You did with fervor when we were young, and the band Enormous Richard was really sort of taking off for a year up in Chicago and everything. But then we're more reserved about it later in our years because we just enjoy the music making so much. But then Megan steps in with the label, and he's really encouraging a much more thoughtful process of releasing music and having a real strategy. Of course, he's had decades to learn from some of the best as well, and so he shares that with us and incorporates some of those things. But with that means that there is a little bit of a process of properly sharing your music and properly releasing it, and it's a little slower than it is faster. And so I just wanted to set that context for you, Megan, because when we're faced with so many projects that we want to release, one of the questions to you, Megan, is, and this hopefully is helpful to those watching as well, is like, how do you put out music effectively and keep up with, being prolific at the same time?
Yeah, so one of the big things is to think about how you're going to spread the word of the music going out. This day, the easiest way to do it is through social media. What I see a lot of, especially independent bands doing, is they'll just post up on Facebook, "Hey, our new record is out. Go listen to it," and that's the end of the process.
Hmm.
In reality, what you want to do is extend the rollout over a long period of time, and that means going through and engaging with the audience over a period of time so that people can pick up on, um, can get interested in the music. They have time to comment on things, releasing songs one song at a time before the full album comes out. And the idea being that by the time that the full album comes out, there will already have been a lot of interest in the record, um, that so people are already thinking about it, and they'll be listening, and there'll be a wider audience as a result of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it in a context of um, if I just, everything's so short attention span
Hmm.
these days with social media and all these things. And it's like if I just put out a record and I say, here's the record, then most likely somebody might think, oh, cool, but they don't really have time to listen to it. But if I
Right.
told them 5 times, hey, I've got a record coming out, even if it's just little teensy bits, and then I said, here's the record, they might feel a little bit more, if it was reversed, I might feel a little bit more, um, just follow through to like, let me click on it and go listen to the record that they told me they were putting out. So
Right. Like,
makes
and
sense.
here's how I look at it. If you just simply, here's the whole record, you literally have one promotion cycle, which in this day and age is a day. And if you do it right, you can stretch that promotion cycle out for each single over 7 weeks by feeding little bits of the content out over a period of time. And then by the time the full record comes out, you'll have had, let's say you've got 10 songs, you do five as a pre-release. By the time the full record comes out, you will have had 35 weeks of promotion constantly. And that is what creates a buzz. It's not that single one up and down. It's promoting singles over a long period of time in order to get interest in the album when it finally comes out.
Well, it's been a lot of fun putting out records with you, Megan, and being able to say now I can say to somebody, I can say, oh yeah, we're releasing a single about every 2 weeks now, steadily.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yep.
that's true.
But to answer the actual question before we go, the next few things that we'll release will be The Poet's Actually Me, which is interesting because I got into poetry scores because I was tired of singing my words. But after a certain time, so many people were writing songs with us that I got tired of singing at all. And I was dropping out of having a role because I was never a musician per se. So I started writing poetry for people to put to music so I would stay in the band. And but my poetry tends to be, but not only, tends to be from other sources. So we've got in the can Lost in Siberia, which is a poem cycle I wrote based upon traditional Siberian sources, which if that sounds boring, you're wrong. It's fascinating. And we have
That was a lot of fun to write to too, because
we
it's
have
it's a real
we have a
theme.
oh, it's so great. And then we have a record that I forget what are we calling the one of the Chinese one? Oh, Helping the Thunder, and that's from the Mao people, not Chairman Mao, but there's a people called the Mao that are from Szechuan, which we know mostly from the Szechuan pepper and the chicken dish. But so we have a book, a record of poems, a record of songs based upon Siberian material and ethnic minority Chinese material that are ready just to be mastered and released.
Yeah, and we've got boy, we have so many too. We've got Woodpecker, which is one we're working on right now, where it's another Sean McGovern record because Sean's doing all the singing on it, but it all comes
My
from your poem.
poems and mostly from John G. Burke is my main source.
Yeah, and that
John G.
one
Burke.
that one was a lot of fun. We really ventured out on that too, where we back in June of this year, we traveled all the way to Columbus, Ohio, and decided to make the record at Relay Recording, which is John Finnell's studio, and we've been making that with John, and we had done a previous record,
Great
Porcupine,
studio.
with John. Yeah, really, really fun to start getting out of my studio too and collaborate with people. And then, of
And
course,
that
we have Crossing America, Leo Cannell, and that's one that's been done and released for many years, but only on the CD. And so we'll do a re-release of that as digital, and that'll be a lot of fun to get out too. There's probably more, but we can. That's probably good for now, right? That'll keep us busy for a minute.
Yep.
Well, any closing thoughts, Megan?
No closing thoughts. Check out the record on Apple Music, and then the full album comes out on all platforms this Friday. So
This
check out
Friday,
Spotify,
November. What's that?
November 8th.
8th. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then I posted the Apple Music link in the YouTube comments. It's a pinned
Cool.
comment, so you can see it right there.
Cool. And the band name is
check it out.
Three Fried Men. So look that up on Apple and Spotify. And
I think I tried to show the album artwork, but somehow I didn't manage to do that.
Oh.
We don't have that handy, do we? I guess it's a digital thing. Well, if you click on that, you'll see it on Apple Music. It's really amazing. Matt Fuller did the whole, linoleum cutout look for a picture of Orhan Veli taken from a famous photograph, and it just looks so cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Chris, Megan, great to see you. I'll stay on this with you guys for a moment. Don't hang up just yet, but I'm going to say goodbye to everybody on YouTube. That's the country salute in honor of our skunk, the mascot. Thanks for watching. Peace out. All right, hang tight, guys. Don't go nowhere.
We're still here.
I got to end the YouTube stream. I guess I have to wait for it to end, and then I end it. It's kind of confusing.
By the way, I have fucked up a lot of things in my life, but I am so proud how much shit that I've held on to. And I've more than once in the time since, I have had times in my life where I did not have any particular place to live. And all of these things somehow stay with me. Here it is, dude, man. Ode to Bayou.
Man. We got to do, we need to do a digital cassette transfer session. We should do that at your house. I should think about how do I bring a cassette player and something to capture, and we just sit there and roll cassettes in. Maybe we have a portable one so we can bring it with us to every brewery and go have a beer, and we're just like transferring cassettes in.
All right, so listen to the songs that we wrote that we have not recorded. Love and the Tavern, Epitaph 3, Mahmoud the Loafer, Everything, End of Day, Poem with Pigeons.
Wow.
Cab Driver's Wife, My Gold Tooth Lover, Carnation, Lost in the Shredder, Migrations. Most of these are untouched, dude. Most. I have fucked up a lot of things in my life.
Whoops.
I am so proud of how much shit.
I guess it didn't end when I ended it, so we got our last chatter. Some of it probably went live.